Exposed, shamed, and now falling apart. Keir Starmer just crumbled under live TV pressure in a way that no British Prime Minister has done in years. It wasn't just a bad interview, it was a national reckoning. Questions he never thought he'd have to answer were thrown at him like daggers, and for the first time, Starmer had no defence, no polished slogans, no clever pivots, just silence, stammering, and the look of a man who knows the mask is slipping. Promises made, promises broken, and now, with the resignation of his deputy Angela Rayner shaking the foundations of Labour, with growing unrest over free speech crackdowns and the public turning cold, one question looms above all. Has Keir Starmer already lost control of the country? When Keir Starmer took the leadership of the Labour Party, he stood in front of the cameras with calm authority, telling the nation he was a man of principles. A man of promises. He vowed to protect workers, defend civil liberties and restore trust in politics. But that version of Starmer, the one who stood tall and spoke of hope, is nowhere to be found today because now those very promises are coming back to destroy him. On live television, Starmer was asked a simple question. Can you name 3 major promises you've fulfilled since becoming Prime Minister? He froze, blinked, looked down, and for the next 40 seconds, Starmer tried to talk. But nothing came out that resembled an answer. Instead, the nation watched a man unravel, live. And what were those promises? He said he'd abolish university tuition fees. He didn't. He said he'd nationalise key industries like rail and energy. Instead, prices have soared and profits funnel to private companies. He said he'd protect freedom of speech, but now peaceful protesters are being arrested with no explanation. And the public is watching. From Manchester to Swansea, ordinary people feel betrayed. They voted for change, but what they got was silence, evasion and betrayal. One pensioner, interviewed by a local station in Hull, said it best. He looked us in the eye and promised a better life. Now I can't afford to heat my home, and he's too busy censoring protesters to care. But the humiliation on live television wasn't just about policies. It was about trust. Starmer didn't fumble because he forgot a talking point. He crumbled because the truth finally caught up with him. The truth that his leadership was built not on conviction, but on convenience. He told different groups different things, hoping they'd never compare notes, but now every contradiction is exposed, every broken promise replayed in viral clips with millions of views. A trending video from last night titled "Starmer Lies vs Starmer Today" hit 3.1 million views in just 6 hours, and the comments are brutal. We were fooled, he's worse than Blair. This isn't what I voted for. And the consequences are piling up fast. Internally, Labour is in chaos. Angela Rayner, once Starmer's closest political ally, has resigned, sending shockwaves through Westminster. Her official statement was cold and short, but her aides made sure the message was heard loud and clear. This is no longer a party I recognise. It's not Labour and it's not leadership. Her departure opens a deep wound in the party that cannot be ignored. She was the bridge between the working class and the political elite, and with her gone, that bridge has collapsed. Within hours of her resignation, 6 other senior party staffers handed in notices, and whispers of a coup have already started circulating in the corridors of power. But while internal pressure builds, it's what's happening on the streets that could break Starmer for good. The arrests of peaceful protesters under the banner of protecting public order have triggered a national conversation about civil liberties. Videos have emerged of elderly citizens being dragged away from rallies for simply holding placards, students suspended for speaking out on campuses, journalists being told not to ask unhelpful questions. Starmer's government insists it's about safety, but critics say it's about control. Control over speech, control over dissent, control over a population that's starting to ask too many questions. And now the backlash is real. Human rights organisations, civil liberties watchdogs, and even former Labour MPs have condemned the arrests as deeply authoritarian. A prominent QC told The Times this morning, "The current approach to public order under Starmer is dangerously close to criminalising thought." And the public agrees. In the last YouGov poll, 67% of respondents said they no longer trust Starmer to protect free speech. That's not a minor dip. That's collapse. That's public confidence being obliterated in real time. But here's the terrifying part for Labour. All of this is happening at once. Live TV meltdowns, broken promises, internal resignations, public unrest, constitutional criticism, and the pressure is mounting not by the day but by the hour. Starmer may have once seemed calm and calculated, but now he looks like a man out of moves, a man cornered by truth. And in British politics, that's the beginning of the end. Westminster wasn't just tense, it was boiling. Angela Rayner's resignation didn't just send shockwaves through Labour, it cracked the foundation beneath Keir Starmer's leadership. What was once whispered in corridors and denied in interviews was now being said openly. Starmer is no longer in control. Within hours of Rayner's exit, top Labour insiders began leaking damning messages to journalists. One senior official told The Guardian, Angela was the last thread holding the grassroots together. Now it's civil war. Another, more bluntly, this government's falling apart and we're still pretending we have a strategy. The timing couldn't be worse. A leaked internal memo obtained by The Spectator revealed that Starmer's own policy team had warned him weeks ago that the public was turning. The memo, dated just 18 days before Rayner's resignation, outlined polling trends, internal discontent, and the growing suspicion that Starmer was no longer the candidate of change, but the face of betrayal. And instead of course-correcting, he doubled down, tightened media access, restricted questions, and increased security presence at public events. The irony, in trying to appear strong, he exposed his fear. Now the cracks are visible, and they're spreading. Behind closed doors, Labour's upper ranks are in panic mode. WhatsApp groups of MPs are flooded with one-word replies. Enough. One MP who previously supported Starmer's leadership bid messaged colleagues, we can't go into another election like this. He's a liability. 3 shadow ministers have already cancelled media appearances this week. One aide was overheard saying, we're ghosting journalists until this dies down. But it's not dying down, it's getting worse. Because Starmer's critics aren't just anonymous insiders anymore. They're going public. MP Zara Sultana went viral last night after appearing on Channel 4 and saying bluntly, we promised transformation, we delivered compromise, that's not leadership, that's surrender. The clip was shared over 4 million times in under 12 hours. Jess Phillips, once a Starmer loyalist, posted, the people deserve truth, and right now they're not getting it from number 10. Her tweet racked up over 300,000 likes before noon. The rebellion is no longer speculative, it's operational. And then came the ultimate humiliation. A BBC Question Time audience booed Starmer's name not once, not twice, but 5 times during the night. The panel struggled to regain control. One voter stood up and said, he arrested students for speaking out, let pensioners freeze, and still claims to be a man of the people. Please. The audience erupted in applause. A Labour leader being booed by a public broadcaster's audience is almost unthinkable. But it happened, and it was televised across the nation. Meanwhile, pressure is mounting from the very institutions Starmer once sought to protect. Legal scholars have now begun openly questioning the constitutionality of the free speech arrests. A joint letter signed by 47 law professors from universities across Britain accused the government of abandoning the principles of democratic dissent. Civil liberties charity Liberty issued a statement declaring the line has been crossed. Peaceful expression is being criminalised and the government must answer for it. An answer they must, because now international scrutiny is beginning to build. Human Rights Watch issued a rare rebuke of the UK government, calling the recent arrests deeply disturbing in a so-called mature democracy. The European Court of Human Rights has been petitioned to investigate the cases. Headlines from France, Germany and Canada question whether Britain is still a safe haven for freedom of expression. The damage isn't just domestic anymore, it's global. Starmer is becoming the face of repression, not reform. But while the institutions speak, it's the public that roars. Protests have reignited across major cities. In Bristol, over 4,000 demonstrators gathered in front of the council building holding signs that read, "You promised us a voice, now you jail it." In Nottingham, students have occupied lecture halls for 3 straight days, refusing to leave until Starmer apologises publicly and commits to repealing recent protest legislation. In Scotland, demonstrators projected "Resign" onto the side of Edinburgh Castle, drawing viral attention across social media. And through it all, Starmer remains almost completely silent. His last press conference ended after just 6 minutes. No questions allowed, just a prepared statement read without emotion. "We are a government of law and order. Dissent is protected, violence is not." But there was no violence, there were no threats, only signs, voices and questions. Questions that Starmer refuses to face. Inside number 10, aides describe a Prime Minister who is tense, paranoid and increasingly disconnected. According to one leak, Starmer now reviews his media mentions every morning before any policy briefing. He reportedly demanded his communications team shut down the noise on social platforms, a command that was met with blank stares, because it's not just noise anymore. It's a revolt, one that even his staff can no longer contain. Behind the curtains, Labour strategists are scrambling at emergency meetings, damage control, briefings and talk. Quiet but growing of leadership change. It's no longer just about fixing the messaging, it's about survival, because once a leader loses the room, the cameras and the country, it's only a matter of time before he loses the party too. While Keir Starmer retreats behind locked doors and silent corridors, the nation is beginning to speak louder than ever. What started as frustration is now full-blown rebellion, and the fire isn't just coming from Labour's enemies, it's coming from its own base. The voters who once stood behind Starmer, who believed in his promises of change, are now turning their backs with fury. And while Labour scrambles to plug the leaks and calm the panic, a familiar figure is rising from the ashes, a man who knows how to seize political chaos and turn it into opportunity. Nigel Farage. Across the country, Labour strongholds are slipping. In Doncaster, long considered a safe Labour zone, thousands gathered outside the local council building, waving red flags. Not in support, but in protest. "You lied to us!" one woman shouted into a megaphone, her voice cracking. "You jailed our sons for speaking out. You let our elderly freeze and now you hide." Her words went viral, shared over 2.9 million times on X. In Leeds, chants of "Starmer out" echoed through the city centre, joined by student groups, trade unionists, even former Labour councillors. One man held up a sign that read, "Free speech is not a crime," but Starmer made it one. Meanwhile, the arrest count grows. As of this morning, over 117 people have been detained under the public order emergency regulations. Laws rush through Parliament with minimal scrutiny, now weaponised against peaceful protest. They're crimes. Holding signs, chanting slogans, sharing posts deemed inciting disobedience. Even children have been caught in the net. A 16-year-old in Liverpool arrested for refusing to delete a TikTok video critical of government policy. When that story hit the press, Britain changed overnight because it was no longer a debate about politics. It was about fear. Parents across the country are now questioning whether their children can speak freely online. University students are demanding protection from political surveillance. Civil servants are quietly resigning in protest. And as the backlash grows, Starmer's silence becomes deafening. He has yet to answer for these arrests. He has not addressed the resignation of Angela Rayner. He has not explained why his government is behaving more like a regime than a democracy. But while Starmer disappears, Farage emerges. At 6:30 p.m. yesterday evening, Nigel Farage stood on the steps of Parliament. No teleprompter, no script, just raw defiance. His words echoed across the square and into millions of living rooms. "This is not the Britain we fought for. This is not the Labour Party we once knew. When a government fears its people, it no longer governs. It rules." The crowd roared and social media exploded. Within 3 hours, the full speech reached 5.6 million views on YouTube. Commentators across Europe began calling it the speech that broke Labour. And Farage wasn't finished. In the same speech, he laid out a blistering indictment of Starmer's failures. He said he'd protect the working class, but it cuts their fuel support. He said he'd defend free speech, but he locks up dissenters. He said he'd bring unity, but all we see is division, surveillance and shame. Each sentence struck like a hammer, not just at Starmer, but at the very soul of Labour's claim to moral authority. The Treasury has entered red alert mode following Starmer's sweeping crackdown on protest. International credit agencies have begun re-evaluating Britain's political stability. Moody's placed the UK on negative outlook late last night, citing institutional uncertainty and erosion of civil freedoms. The pound sterling took another hit, sliding 1.8% against the dollar, wiping nearly £6.3 billion off the FTSE 100 in under 48 hours. Foreign investors are backing away. Hedge funds are shorting British bonds. And one Swiss banker was quoted anonymously in the Financial Times saying, "Britain's starting to look less like a democracy and more like a fragile regime." Meanwhile, leaked documents from the Cabinet Office have detonated like a political bomb. Obtained by The Independent, the documents reveal that Starmer's team had been warned 3 weeks ago that their emergency protest laws could breach international human rights standards. The memo explicitly flagged Articles 10 and 11 of the European Convention on Human Rights, warning that mass arrests without violence would almost certainly result in litigation and political fallout. But the warning was ignored, and now the fallout is here. And inside Number 10, silence has given way to chaos. Multiple sources confirm that 2 senior aides have quit in the last 48 hours. One reportedly left after a screaming match with Starmer over his refusal to apologise publicly. Another described the Prime Minister as obsessed with narrative control, even as the ship sinks. Crisis meetings have turned toxic. Blame is being tossed like grenades across departments. And worst of all, Starmer is alone. His closest advisor, Sue Gray, has gone completely silent in recent days, with insiders saying she's detached, distant and clearly preparing for life after Keir. But the final blow may come from Parliament itself. As of this morning, 34 Labour MPs have privately indicated they are willing to support a no-confidence motion. 7 have drafted resignation speeches. Internal WhatsApp groups with names like Project Reclaim and Labour Reboot are now openly coordinating the takedown. One message leaked to Sky News reads simply, "Monday, 3 p.m. He's done." Outside Parliament, the nation is bracing. Over 100,000 protesters are expected to gather in London this weekend under the banner, "Restore Free Speech, Remove Starmer." The organisers include former Labour donors, civil liberty groups and student unions. Police have quietly requested additional support from neighbouring counties, fearing mass unrest. But the protesters insist it will be peaceful, unless provoked, as one organiser put it. But everyone knows what that means. If even one arrest is made on camera, if even one placard is confiscated, the images will go viral and the fire will rage uncontrollably. International reactions are already stacking up. The United Nations Human Rights Council has released a formal letter requesting clarification on the UK's mass arrests. Canada's Prime Minister has expressed deep concern over the erosion of civil discourse. Even the United States State Department issued a statement late last night saying freedom of expression is the cornerstone of any democratic society. The translation is simple. Britain is on the verge of global embarrassment, and Starmer's name is now synonymous with suppression. But perhaps the most symbolic development came just hours ago. King Charles, silent through much of this chaos, issued a carefully worded statement through Buckingham Palace affirming the importance of safeguarding the ancient liberties of the British people. It did not mention Starmer by name. It didn't need to. The message was clear. The Crown is watching and the Prime Minister has gone too far. So now we are left with one final question. Can Labour survive Keir Starmer? The polls suggest no. Labour's national support has dropped to 23%, their lowest since before the 2019 election. Reform UK is now within 2 points. In working class seats that once voted Labour for 3 generations, Farage is winning, not by inches, by miles. The very coalition that lifted Starmer into power is abandoning him with fury. And within Labour HQ, senior figures are already discussing transitional leadership. Names like Yvette Cooper, Wes Streeting, and even David Lammy are being floated. Anything, they say, to restore credibility. So now it's your turn. Should Starmer step down before he's pushed? Has the Labour Party betrayed its principles beyond repair? Is free speech in Britain truly under threat? Or are we watching the collapse of a leader who never truly believed in it to begin with?